Well, y'all, it's about a minute after 2, so it does look like we have a quorum. We'll call this meeting to order. I want to welcome you to the Tiers Board meeting for May 20th, 2025. Thanks to all of y'all who are in attendance and our guests today. So we do know a quorum is present, correct? Okay, all right. Well, let's move into the consent agenda. We've got some meeting minutes from April 22nd. If you would, please look over them. And if you see anything that needs to be changed or corrected, let us know. Or feel free to speak up. And if not, we'll look for a motion to accept them.
Motion to approve.
All right. So all in favor, say aye. All right. So got that done. And now, do we have any public comment?
I don't have any public comment today.
Okay, I didn't think so, but still wanted to ask. So we can hop right into the regular agenda. Yeah, this is a new setup.
They're trying to do this to see if it helps with the sound.
Okay.
So if y'all have any feedback after the meeting, please have some feedback. We did this with Planning Commission yesterday. Obviously, we still have a couple of Tiers Board members that are not here, and so we'll probably spread out and have staff over on this side next time if this is an acceptable spot. All right. So let's move on to our financial report. So I believe you did receive this in your packet, and thank you to Hannah for sending that packet out. She was waiting on me, so if there's any delay or issue, that was on my fault, not Hannah's fault. But she did send this packet out. So there on the south, things have not changed financially wise. You see available for assignment 408. But that needs to take into the account the $181,000 that y'all had approved and did get approved at City Council for those 3 projects. So our real amount for available for assignment is $227,000, 227,280.
And just to be clear, you did say those projects were approved at City Council.
They were approved
Okay.
at City Council at the last, not today, but the prior meeting.
Okay.
We got those to City Council as fast as we could because some of those projects are waiting to get the contract done so they can get started, and we're trying to move those as quickly as possible.
Okay.
On the north side, things are unchanged. We have not seen any reduction in our property tax values. I know our finance team is already working with the appraisal district, seeing what's going to be projected coming in. As you guys know, there's this time period now. I think either today or the last day is for folks to go and submit information to challenge their valuation, and then they'll start working through those cases, and then towards the end of the summer, we'll get our final numbers and what our projections will be. They will work with us on putting that, but it's stayed fairly solid and in fact increasing over the last few years and staying about that 1.2, which is pretty high for the south, and then the 1.2 even in the north. So we anticipate having something around that 1.1 to 1.2 coming in next year for these areas. What I do need to do for our next meeting is put in there of what the impacts are for the sidewalk project that you voted for that would start in 2026, and what does it look like for the sunsetting of the project for the Chadburn project, taking those dollars out. So we'll work on that to get y'all a financial statement that shows what those dollars are going to be. And so if those dollar values, if those available for assignment can go up and things like that. So for our north, still very, very strong, a lot of funding still there. That 2.5 is a very big number. Obviously, I know our friends with Downtown San Angelo who are here have worked very hard getting a lot of north side projects coming through. That window is always open, and so if you're out there listening from the public, the north side is always open with applications to come in and apply, and we encourage folks to do that, either contact downtown San Angelo, or they can contact the city of San Angelo as well, and we'll get them and start working the application process with them. But obviously, that's a big number and something that we'll want to continue to talk about and seeing what we can do to help facilitate utilizing some of those funds in different ways. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions on the financial report.
Anybody have any questions?
All right.
All right. I was going to say, I think that was talking about the North Zone. That's a great segue into the item number B, or item B.
Yes, item B. So as we move forward with the request from the Tiers Board to add some additional criteria to our policy for nonprofits for the North, it was discussed at the first meeting in May with City Council, and they voted on a motion to not allow nonprofits to apply for private incentives, north or south, and it received a 6-to-1 affirmative vote, so that the policy now is that nonprofits on north or south are not able to apply for private incentives. So they will be removed from the policy statements. So as we move forward, they won't be there until the policy is updated in the future, if the policy is updated in the future.
When does that go into effect?
Officially, it went into effect
After
when
that meeting?
they voted. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. We are working on updating our information. While it's not a big challenge to do, we're waiting to just get it all updated and make sure we're finding all the bits and pieces that may reference that and going through the documents and making that adjustment. So at this time, we don't really have a big discussion or necessary, but I did put it as for discussion for the board.
Who was the one person who voted in favor?
That's a great question, and I want to believe it was Ms. Gonzalez. I think it was Ms. Gonzalez. I think she was the one that voted in favor.
Any thoughts you want to express?
I've said it all before.
Yeah.
So is there an appeal process?
No, there's not. Now, obviously, this board can continue to have discussions and continue to bring items to City Council as recommendations for policies. That is always an option for this board to do that, but there's not really an appeal process
For the citizens?
for the citizens on that level. I mean, the City Council is the final say on that type of item.
I just wanted
Can you tell
that to be
me
stated.
what was the general opinion of the majority who wanted to nix the nonprofits? What was their rationale, reasoning?
I think their sentiment is kind of follows maybe our next discussion item a little bit. They did ask for some background information. Our city interim attorney, Mr. Brandon Dyson, did look at the state law. There are not prohibitions in the state law to prevent nonprofits from benefiting from tiers. There are some clauses in there that nonprofits can participate in, like infrastructure projects, which benefit really more the city side, but really the whole citizens, not really the private incentives. And I think maybe that's where the thing that stuck in some of them is the private incentive for this private property as opposed to a public improvement. I do believe all of them strongly support the work of nonprofits in our community. I think some of them just wondered, is utilizing this fund the way to do that? Because there are probably other departments and programs that utilize our local tax dollars for nonprofits in different ways. Just is the tiers fund, is that the appropriate way to use it? And I think some of them had enough question in their mind to say not at this time.
Okay.
And so that's all levels, nonprofit, all nonprofit classes.
So I might want to, I'm
C3,
thinking,
C4, C6,
I was going to
all
ask
of them.
Shirley where, like, finish the statement there. I was going to say, I know you're going somewhere, so help the rest of us get there.
It hasn't come out of my brain cells yet, but I'm just making sure that it's C3, C4, C, 5, 6, all of them. It's for all classes of nonprofit?
I think my answer is generally yes.
Okay.
I would say that the local government was exempted from being lumped into a nonprofit status. And so, and I'm not sure if that's where your question's heading is, can the city still use these funds for
No,
infrastructure?
it wasn't for the city, it
But
was
it's
for
really
the
for like,
citizens.
if it's a
If it's a
political,
C6,
yeah.
it's a C6 that has a building somewhere,
Right.
are they not able to participate as well for these?
I believe that's the stance
So it's
currently.
all,
Yes, ma'am. I think that is the
Classes,
stance
okay.
currently.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean that the city of San Angelo, which is a nonprofit government agency, next time they ask us for money, they're not gonna be eligible?
No, they did exempt the city government as allowing to be
I
eligible.
figured that.
'Cause for most communities, that's what tiers funds were set up for.
They're
were-
gonna be asking us for money in the coming future, I can tell you that.
Yes, sir.
They may get a no vote from me.
Yes, sir.
I was going to say, we can all exercise our right to vote there. Yeah.
That's true.
So really, this is kind of the end of the discussion on
It is
nonprofits.
the end and
For the moment.
For the moment, unless the board wants to take it back up for, and I think, while I can't speak for the individual council members, but I think council in general is what is they kind of kept hanging their hat on what is the big benefit for the district. Now, some of them said that equates to how is it raising property values over time. And I think there are different ways to do that. And I think there are some opportunities for public-private partnerships to do that.
Sure. So that could be part of the strategic planning sessions that
could be.
that we're going to talk about next.
It
then.
could be.
Yeah. Thank you, Shirley. One of the two brain cells is working. I mean, unless anybody else had any comments or more discussion on the last point, we can move forward. All
for
right.
the record, I like your comment, and I'd love to see us being able to put that in the strategic plan.
Okay.
All right, Chairman. So the next item, at the end of that city council meeting, Councilman Hebert asked for the Tiers Board to look at the financial project plan adopted in 2012 and us start having a joint discussion or committee meetings to determine, does our finance project plan still meet our needs and goals of what we're doing with the Tiers Fund? So I know Hannah had sent probably the 2006 and the 2012. The 2012 is the current financial plan that was adopted by City Council. It does not look significantly or really at all different than the one adopted in 2006. And so I'll go and talk about that just a little bit. Of course, the 2006, just call it Zone Number 1, the financial plan in 2006. Most recently, February 2012, and that went through lots of, I would say, 3 council meetings worth of discussions, and it virtually remained unchanged, and it balanced between trying to figure out what was the best for infrastructure, what is the best for private entities requesting funding. So within this project plan there, you can see the 8 to 10 items, and I would say that they're not listed in the finance plan as a hierarchy of all because streets and sidewalks and crosswalks are at the top. That doesn't mean that's the number one item per se. That's just where it got listed. Interestingly enough, as I went back and read it, we've kind of, even within our own policy statement, says that we don't really like parking projects by themselves. It might be as part of another project. Yet our financing plan seems to indicate that we would be taking on some of those projects. And so maybe there's a little bit of disconnect there. The commercial building and site renovations, that really does come back to those private incentive funds. What are we doing to help them? And usually that's facade, some kind of renovation, maybe it's the ADA accommodations, those types of things, and same with the building and site renovations. Roadway and traffic management, obviously we've done quite a bit of that with the South Concho project, and I think we've done some of that in some other areas. Parks and public facilities, we really haven't utilized a whole lot of tiers funding for parks and public facilities. And again, it may not just be high on the list because we have a lot of needs in our tiers district. Utilities and drainage, environmental remediation and safety improvements, and this comes back to, and it just specifically spoke to asbestos surveys, fire suppression, egress out of buildings, and then you think about all those big buildings downtown, whether they're 2, 3, 4 stories, and you have a large space and it costs a lot of money to put in things. And so we understand that. Same with the public safety, but this public safety talked about basically a line item for our public safety entities of do they need more equipment in the tiers zone to help it be safer. And then it talks about creation of the zone and administration of the zone. Interestingly enough, and I think it's still okay, but the administration of the zone, the numbers that they put in there, we're not reaching those numbers at all. And so those monies go back into the fund for assignment. So the city council did ask us to evaluate our current policies and financing plan. There's really a couple of ways we could do that. One is just do a simple joint meeting, but I'm not sure we're going to get through a joint meeting without going an entire day of doing that with city council and the tiers board. And I'm not sure that everybody has the available time to do that. Maybe that's the way we go, but I'm just trying to say. What I think might be better is to appoint some members from this board, ask the new mayor to appoint some members from his city council, ask them to appoint some citizens, like downtown San Angelo, that can come in and help give some perspective of what the impacts are. I would love to have somebody from maybe ASU or Goodfellow there, because what we do in downtown impacts them and their ability to draw people. And have some meetings during the summertime to talk about these things and figure out, do we need to update our financing plan and get that approved through city council, or just simply adjust our policies and make sure that we're doing things. Now, I think there's some indication based on our financing plan, there's a lot of heavy infrastructure type things, but some of that might be an evaluation. What infrastructure is missing? I think we could all say there's always sidewalks missing, but we're not sure. Well, I put my planner hat on. I think sidewalks are great, but at the same time, if you invest $30,000 in a sidewalk in front of one business, does that improve the property tax for the block? I'm not sure that it does. And now if you're looking at 10 properties, now you're looking at $250,000 for a sidewalk project, and does that really raise it at the end? Those are all questions to analyze and really, all right, what's our best recommendation? As opposed to, all right, if we were to give $75,000 or $100,000 per building, and it was to get a sprinkler system and become usable, or it got a better egress system, does that really change the property values over time? And I think that's the balance we have to weigh out, because part of it is do we have the city infrastructure for private investment to come into the area, or do we need to provide it? And if we already have it, what are we doing to help maybe incentivize those private investors to say, okay, this is the place we want to be along Chadbourne, along MLK, along Bryant, in our downtown area. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, to Board Chairman. I know this is a big topic, and I know we've got some work to do this summer. Fortunately, the tiers budget is set by property tax valuation. That's why on the financing plan, I said, I need to get you those numbers so we can look at what our targets are. And then really, as we know those combined with this, what is our plan moving forward, so that when we're ready to open up a south window of private incentives, we know this is what we're going to really target, and so that our folks that help market this, downtown San Angelo, they know, hey, I really need to tell them they're really interested in this or this, and really target these things, trying to move forward with an eye on the end game of, in 10 years, 2036, This tiers district could be over unless it's extended by city council or others. And so we need to be mindful of those dollars and how we spend them, and are they going to continue to work for us when it closes?
Sure. So before we discuss this, I just need to back up on just a couple of things. So when you mentioned the financing, what you're really saying is that we have not awarded $18 million in projects like it was projected, or that we have not received $18 million in property taxes, just so we can clarify.
I think both of those statements are true. We have not awarded, nor have we received that amount, and that's because this was projected on the full term of 30 years, not
Okay.
just the 19 and a half years that we're at now.
Okay.
We feel like we're on track, but I would say if you go and you look at some of those categories that they have there that have kind of broken out on, if you happen to have that packet with you, it's on page 30. I'm not sure that all of those, when we talk about environmental remediation and safety improvements, and it says 2.9 million.
Or Aaron, I don't mean to interrupt you. Are you talking about the 2012 plan or the 2006 plan?
The 2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what page?
Page 30.
Oh, okay. There we go.
At the very top, that's where they kind of start breaking it down, and the project costs
Okay.
are estimated as follows, and they were doing estimates. I think if Hannah and I went and did an audit, we're probably not going to get to 2.9. We might get to 2 on safety items, but then you still have 10 more years to go. And
Sure.
so what does that look like? And we know that the Chadburn project was a big high dollar project. I mean, it cost a lot of money. We know the next project between the two, I want to say it was like $3.1 or $3.2 million. That's a lot of money for streetscape and sidewalk and things like that. And so we just need to, as a board, saying, all right, here's our policies, here's our financing plan. Are they still congruent? If they're not, where do we want to lead this board, this fund? How do we want to do that? And then we'll make that presentation. I think it's good to get the city council input at the same time as we're trying to develop that plan.
Absolutely. So Hannah, not to put you on the spot, I know that audit is not just punching up an Excel spreadsheet and a few pivot tables. So do you have an idea on the timeline for that audit?
I'm actually hoping within the next 2 meetings, probably. I'm actually started digging deeper for the research, and I'm finding a lot more from past employees that have been here.
Okay.
A lot more that I have to start picking apart too, because there is some, I guess, details in it where they did assign some money for some people, but then they ended up not getting the project done, or they ended up maybe only doing half. And back then, that's when they also gave the 10% before the project started. And so there's a lot of, they only paid that 10%, they didn't finish their project, and so then they're
You
having.
mean the city paid 10%
Correct.
down?
Yeah,
Okay.
they got the 10%.
Because I know there's a
before.
match there, yeah.
Correct. And so then there's me I have to go through that to make sure, okay, they did pay the 10%, but did they end up getting the full amount, or did they have to reimburse even just back that 10%, which still makes a difference, even though it doesn't seem that much.
Sure.
So
And you're projecting 2 months on that?
I would say about 2 to maybe 3 months, because I know that Aaron and I want to sit down and go over it, finalize it before.
Sure, absolutely.
But I'd say maybe 2 to 3 months, but I'll update you on that on the next meeting.
Well, no, I understand, and like I said, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just think, when we're having strategy discussions, to be able to have them with all the information, the more information we have, the better decisions we can make. And so if we can
Correct.
see that there are areas that need improvement, or I would say are areas that are not as financed as some others that we were planning on, then we can regroup around that discussion. So that's what I was thinking of, but it doesn't sound like we'll have all of that information in time for summertime meetings.
Yeah, I'm about 8 years back right now. If you think about it, started in 2016 is kind of where the funding kind of starts for me, from what I can find just looking at it.
Sure.
So I'm started working from there. So
Yeah.
I'm about 8 to
And-
10 years back.
Yeah, and it's perfectly fine. I mean, we can use the information we have to make decisions and move forward with that. But really on that, so now it's up to the board to decide. I mean, we have talked about the strategic planning sessions, and I know some of y'all are a little newer to this game. than others of us. But these strategic planning sessions, gosh, I feel like they've been somewhere in the wind for at least 6 months, if not a year.
Yeah.
And so I know for some of y'all this is a little bit newer, but as you look at these, really I see two options that Aaron's brought to us. We talk about, we form a strategy committee. That would be, some of us would volunteer, and then city council, and then we could pull in some community members. I can think of a couple that are sitting in the audience right now. Or we have, now to make sure I'm reading that second bullet correctly, 3 to 5 meetings to bring recommendations to the full tiers board and ultimately city council. Are those two, point A and point B, two options for us, or is that the strategy committee meets and then brings the recommendations?
Well, I think the strategy committee would meet, then bring the recommendations here,
Okay.
get the full board support here, or at least enough to move it on to city council. And by the fall goal, the reason I'm thinking fall, that's really not a concrete date, but I do believe there will be the desire to continue to provide private incentives. And if we usually open up after October a fall window for the south,
Sure.
obviously the north is open at any time. I don't think any of us want to really miss that window and delay projects if people are counting on applying for some funding in the fall. And that's just kind of my thought. Now, 3 to 5 meetings, that's the hard part to tell, is do we get this worked out or worked through in 3 to 5 2-hour meetings to get to a good strategy and a good recommendation?
And this ultimately, the ultimate goal of this is we've got 10 years left of tiers. And, we're looking at, I can't remember the projections on the total amount of funds, but hopefully to 18 million by the end of it is to decide what's the best use for that money.
Yeah.
Not just that we decided, but to encourage people to apply for grants and projects. So
Yeah, and if we're roughly looking at 1 million of revenue per side at 2 millions in over 10 years, that's a significant amount of money to invest into that district, and we want to make sure it's going into projects that really are providing help in the district, providing opportunities, and ultimately providing property value increase over time.
Okay. So Shirley, did you have something you wanted to say?
I wanted to clarify on the suggested meetings. So that first one, with members of the board, the tiers board, council, et cetera, differs from the second recommendation, where that would not include council and community members. Am I clear on those two options?
That's a good question. So yes, let me answer that. So, my suggestion is work on it as a committee with council and tiers board together to get their insight and start to get their buy-in early.
Okay.
I think it will take us 3 to 5 meetings to get to a strategy that's ready to come forward to this board and be presented. During those strategy committees, that we would have different community members. Maybe they're full-time committee members. Maybe it's just like the Small Business Development Center coming and doing a presentation at one of those meetings about this is why tiers is important for private incentives in this area, or something like that. But I do think there are the committee should have some general citizen comments from folks that are interested in what's happening in downtown, whether that's Goodfellow, and those are not set in stone by any means. I think those can be taken as recommendations. And do we know some people that are very vested in downtown, and they need to have a help us build what we're doing the next 10 years?
Sure.
Well, the other part of that is, I know that we have like San Angelo, downtown San Angelo, but what about business owners? And they're part of the citizenry as well, and sometimes I think that's why we get into some of the discussions on this board, is because what we're thinking and what an actual business owner is thinking and envisioning is not on the same page with us. And so in this makeup, in addition to organizations like downtown San Angelo, what about and Small Business Development Center is not going to be the actual business owners.
Correct.
It's going to be the organization, which will, have all these numbers and stats and all of that. And your Joe Blow, Jane Doe type business owner is not going to be into that. They're looking at envisioning what they would like to do in different parts of the city, those two parts of the city.
I think that's a great idea. to
Yeah, I was
involve those.
gonna say, as we've been talking about this, and Shirley, you're not alone. That's why I was talking about it like it was two different ideas, and then realized as I was stating it out loud, yeah, we formed a strategy committee, 3 to 5 meetings over the next 4 or 5 months if we're shooting for October, to present it to city council. And then as part of that, community members would include some of those business owners.
I think
that-
we might need to also look at, I don't know how difficult this would be, but maybe look at criteria because, there are a lot of different business owners. I know when we started this process of trying to really increase the money that we were spending in the north a few years ago, there were a lot of business owners who weren't even aware of this process, of this option. And that has certainly improved, over the last 3 years. And so I think maybe we need some type of criteria because I would hate for it to get down to something similar to what we just discussed with nonprofits, that they have to be this, they have to be that, they have to be this or that. So I think maybe some type of generalized statement and level of interest for business owners to participate so that people who really want to participate, who are business owners, are not shut down and closed out.
Right.
That's my concern is that we set the criteria in a way that they can't participate or we don't have any criteria at all. And then someone who just wants to be at the meetings really doesn't have anything to offer. They just want to be, they just want to take up space.
Okay.
Are you referring to business owners generally, or are you referring to business owners within the Tiers district?
Well, I think that's something that needs to be determined. If it's just between these two Tiers districts or business owners in general. And the reason I say that is that if you talk about business owners in general and they're not involved, they don't currently have, a desire to be in North or South, that could kind of change the review of what we're trying to do. Whereas if you get people who are already in those Tiers district, I think it might help us to really do some serious brainstorming if they're already owning property in that area. So I think that's an important thing, Hannah, to consider.
Well,
because I would hate for just to be a waste of space sitting in a meeting and they don't really have a buy-in with anything.
Yeah, not to devil's advocate you, but I'm going to devil's advocate you on because I think the other side of that conversation is there may be some business owners or investors that are interested in downtown but want to be able to speak to what it looks like. So, on
that's
that,
why I was suggesting initially just maybe some criteria, but not to lock anybody who's seriously interested. We don't want to lock anybody out of being able to
absolutely
be a part of the discussion if they have some great ideas. And that's because that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we're trying to move it forward. But I would hate for someone to just come and sit just for the sake of saying they're on that plan and they have nothing to contribute. So I don't know how you determine that, but.
Yeah, and I guess really this question is for the board in general. Aaron, the way I read this, and it's just how my mind breaks it down. There's a few of us that volunteer, a few of city council, we get some people from city council and then the community members who could rotate once we find the criteria to make presentations or give their input. But the other way to interpret this is that we all meet with each of these groups for over the next few months. Maybe we do 2 meetings a month, which I don't know how y'all feel about that, but I'm going to go ahead and put it on the table for us to discuss.
Well, is it the full council, or are we saying a hand select few from council?
Yeah.
I think the desire from council would be they would try to limit themselves so they don't meet a quorum. Now, that doesn't mean that this group couldn't have a quorum and have a public meeting and they would
So
be
we
able
would
to
have to be
participate.
concerned about the same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge and so that's why usually that's 3 or less, typically from a single board that would sit on a committee and then getting that citizen input from different folks.
Okay. That's a good point.
Now, it doesn't mean we couldn't do some joint meetings. It's just, we
Sure.
gotta probably schedule those out a little further. If we're trying to tackle a lot, it's gonna take longer, which
Yeah.
may be okay. But those are the things that we have to consider when we're trying to really look back at our finance plan, really look at our current policies, and do we need to shift and change to meet some of our goals over the next 10 years?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So any other comments? I feel like Shirley and I have been, been the only ones talking, so wanted to make some room.
No, I like the idea of like 3 from us and 3 from the council. I think that
Yeah. I like how you think. I was going to say, do we have 3 people here today that would be willing to be on a strategy committee? And I'll put myself forward as the first volunteer. Do we have any others?
Yes, I would.
So Janet, Joe, anybody else? Well, I think we've.
I'll go on.
Okay,
In
yeah.
your absence, so.
We can just make sure one of us is,
Yeah, we need
one of us is away,
Yeah.
so we're not
50% of us or something.
meeting with quorum, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
And the goal will be to give updates to the full board as
Sure.
we continue to have those committee meetings.
yeah,
As far as, and talking about some citizen input, and I liked Shirley's idea about some criteria, and I'm wondering if it's a mix of folks that have received some tiers funding in the past and have seen some success with it, or others that, as Trey kind of played devil's advocate, of somebody that's within our community that has interest in what's going on in downtown, but they may not own property within the district, and I can see it going either way.
Yeah.
But it might be a mix. Doesn't have to be, obviously, these folks that, and I listed fire prevention, and that's because they're really about the safety aspect, and a lot of the things that they could speak to is, what are our buildings like? And maybe they're just a guest speaker, they're maybe not a committee member, that they just come and talk about, well, this is why it's important to continue some of those private investments because of the safety features that need to happen in our buildings in downtown and along Chadburn and MLK and so forth.
Well, what about the Chamber of Commerce also as another?
I thought about that one too, and I just didn't list it, but I think that's a great
I think
suggestion.
someone from the development side.
Another option could be ex-board members or tiers presidents that
true.
served early on and saw it,
Developed through the years.
and then what they've seen since they've gone back out, not involved.
Okay, that's a great idea.
So we're going to add those?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Because I think the chamber give us a unique perspective in terms of what they may know that's coming down the pipe
Yes, ma'am.
on either side of town.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
That is.
That's a really good idea. So on that note, Aaron, what do you need from us to make this, to form this strategy committee? Do we need a motion? Do we just, we've had 4 volunteers right here.
Kathleen, do you think we need a motion, or this is just information for staff to work towards and bring back to the board what we come up with?
Excuse me. I think that if you wanted to take it to city council to propose to them the committee, then I think you need a motion to do that in a second, of course.
Okay. And I think that's a good idea to take it to city council, and I can get it on the June 3rd agenda, so that we can get started forming that committee, because that's going to be the important part, and then start meeting. Part of it is obviously Hannah and I doing a lot of background work, putting the committee together, getting you information that you need to start digging in and say, all right, where do we want to go?
Okay, so.
Can I add one more comment?
Yes, ma'am.
And I want to make sure that this is done with equity and fairness. We don't need, I don't think we need the council to approve. I don't know how that motion needs to be crafted, but I don't think we need the council to approve the structure of this strategy. It's like an ad hoc, basically, committee, but we don't need them to start passing judgment and decisions on how we've discussed forming this board with input from these different sources that we've mentioned. I don't know how we craft that to make sure that we're not basically asking permission. This is our recommendation that we do this.
So I think that the potential action, and please feel free to add some input, is that it's excuse me, it's discussion and possible action on the strategic planning session. And what we have discussed so far is preparing a committee. And so I think that that is limited to our proposal. It's just that we are maybe proposing to City Council for the establishment of a committee to review for a possible change in the board's plan. Is that right, Aaron?
Yes,
Is that
that's
what you are?
correct.
And Shirley, I understand what you're saying too about, yeah, it would be like, almost like we're going to city council for permission, but also in order to get buy-in, we almost have to ask permission in a sense, because we're going to have city council people who are willing to be part of that committee.
I hear you. I just don't want them to start passing judgment on what we're trying to do, and this group doesn't need to be brought in, and this group doesn't need to participate, to accept the proposal in its completeness, the way we're recommending it is what I'm trying to get at.
I agree with Shirley. I don't want council telling us anything.
Yeah, they're gonna be a member.
It's
just
our
like-
job to tell the council what we think, and then they can make the decision, not them tell us what to do.
Yeah, we're working as a team in order for it to be approved here and then move to the council. And if they're participating, chances are that they might see some of our same positions as we're going through these various meetings.
So in other words, we just form an ad hoc committee, no motion is needed for that, and I'll confess my ignorance on this part, Kathleen, which is why you're here, so we're so thankful for that. But we just form an ad hoc committee and decide we're gonna do this with the three of us, and we invite city council members
Right.
into
And
it,
those other
come to
groups.
those meetings.
I agree
yeah.
with that.
And those other groups that we,
You want that to form a motion?
Well, that's, do we need one if we're not gonna put a proposal before city council? I mean,
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I would
It
say,
said discussion and possible action.
yes, sir.
yeah.
I would say historically, city council has had the ability, or really, each council member has the ability, just like to appoint somebody on a board, that if a committee has come up, and say, I'm going to use the example of the cultural district committee that came up, or the sign ordinance committee that came up, they just simply made appointments of citizens or maybe another person on a board to that.
Is it going to take away some weight of our recommendations if we do the unofficial, if we pursue an unofficial channel on it and don't go before city council? I mean, because I can see, and I kind of lean.
I see both sides.
I can see both sides. I lean with these two, but at the same time, got enough experience, not with city council, but with other organizations, not only for the buy-in, but you get the nod to move forward. And then when we come to make the recommendations for a new strategy, not only do we have buy-in, but we've already had the nod of authority, I guess, brings some weight to the recommendations. We're not just putting stuff out into thin air or doing a bunch of work and spending a bunch of time that is wasted.
right.
Right.
Yeah, so.
Philosophy, I absolutely agree.
Okay, yeah, so,
What I'm going to say is, I'm going to hedge my bet, but my leaning is they would ask Patrick Neely, who's the new District 2 council member who oversees some of that area.
yeah,
They probably would ask Harry Thomas, who's District 3, who oversees some of that area, and then they may pick a third person to do that. Part of it is also my role as well as the board's role, and if we were to move forward with a request to council, we want to form this committee to solve these issues, to work together, is us be there and make that presentation and say, this is what we want to do and why.
sure.
While I know there are times that in the past, the Tiers Board has recommended no on some city funding items, and yet City Council said, no, we're going to fund those things. And I think my goal overall is, all right, how do we get the financing plan and our policies to mesh a little better? and that we've continued to work on building that bridge between us and city council so
Sure.
that when things that come up that really do need to be solved, that we have the mechanisms and the confidence that we can go and solve them with some funding that comes from the Tiers Fund. And if it's for a infrastructure project that goes right in front of all the nonprofits and that helps them, we should advocate for that.
Sure, absolutely. I was going to say, I know I wasn't around for the whole nonprofit discussion, but I feel like that was a discussion amongst the board that kept going to the city council.
Yes.
And we were getting all these no's, and then we got this ultimate no. Maybe if we'd started with a little different tack on it, it could have had a different outcome, which, that's part of the reason we're having this strategy session. But on that note, what is the board's pleasure? I'm not here to make the final decision, but I do know, I feel like we've covered all the bases on it. Do we want to go for a motion? I don't even know how to ask this question.
So if we make a motion to the council asking to form this committee, can we just be real specific and say we want only 3 members or only 2 members so that they don't come in and say, well, we're going to put 4 on and overload it?
They can't put
Well, I think we're talking about,
They can put 3
So the
max.
most would be 3.
Yeah,
I
Correct.
think right now we're talking about whether we're making a motion in this body.
to decide, which
Not a
avenue
motion
do we want to
the
pursue?
council, but a
Right.
motion in this body as
Yeah.
to
Okay.
whether or not we
And-
want to make it a motion or just say we're creating
Yeah,
Right.
an ad hoc.
And I think my strategy would be that the motion would be fairly generic here, but in the background information, that this board has had an opportunity to already look at some names and organizations and the representative from that organization say, okay, we believe this is going to be a good person to represent the committee. So
sure.
that those names are there, ready to be, okay, we've got this group, they just need to add their 3 city council members, and if they have 1 or 2 that they want to add, then we move forward with
And if
that.
you're looking to present this in June, when would we give you that additional information, such as, to Brianna's point, a maximum of 3 city council?
Yeah.
Right.
Because then what we're doing is we're potentially getting a group, a committee, and sometimes, that's been my experience, you get too many people, you don't really get anything done.
Correct.
And so when you're looking at all these groups that are suggested here, we really want to be conscious of that and not end up with a committee of 30 people that are trying to make a decision.
Yeah,
I'd say maybe 6 on the actual committee, tiers, and 3 tiers, 3 council members, and then the community members, and then these others could be, as y'all are meeting,
Call them in.
yeah, we just call them in
Call 'em in.
for information purposes.
It could be, yes.
So, yes, and I apologize, I've been calling you Janet this whole time, I'm sorry, Brianna. Yeah,
Yeah, I just don't want us to have 30 people trying to make a decision.
yeah, no, we don't
Can't
need
move
that.
bus down
Six-
the road. It's not going to happen.
6 to 7 is perfect,
Well,
so,
I want an odd number, though, I
Yeah.
will say that.
yeah.
Question, since we've got runoff, has the new council members,
They're seated.
are they in, or are they?
The 2 that were elected were placed today, yes, sir, and the new mayor
Runoff is on
today.
the
They've
7th.
got 1 holdover, right?
That's correct, we
Runoff is
have,
on the 7th.
yes. So the SMD number 2 is vacated at the moment, pending the runoff election.
So on,
There's no urgency that I
Yeah.
have to go in June in front of city council. I'm just saying I can get it on that council member, or that council agenda, but if it makes sense to postpone and us have another discussion of, well, who should be on this committee? But again, I think these are just all suggestions. I think, like you said, to limit the size of the committee makes a lot of sense. To get an odd number makes a lot of sense. And maybe some of these are just people that present information, and maybe some of them are, just like you said, somebody from the chamber, or maybe an ex-board member or an ex-chairman is actually a committee member.
Yeah.
Yes,
and that would get us to 7.
yes.
So on that note, does anybody want to make a recommendation that we form a committee with the goal? And I'm thinking about this, the reason I'm saying it this way is our next meeting is scheduled for June 24th. We'll have the runoff, would you say June 7th?
7th, yes.
And then there'll be a city council meeting almost immediately after. So we could have the committee already formed, ready, or formed from our side, ready to make the recommendation at the first city council meeting. You know, I'm all about prior planning prevents poor performance, and I think if we wait until June, you know, that just puts us further back. It doesn't put us behind the eight ball, it just puts us further back, so, yeah.
I think it's important that we're ready, like you suggested and what you just said, Trey, to make a decision today if we can, and be ready to rock and roll in June, because then we only have a few months to really strategize, and you have to be considerate of people's availability and time.
Yeah.
Between, and it's the summer, you know, people on vacation and first one thing and another, so if we can, I think we should make a decision today and have it presented at that June 6th, not 6th, June, that would be June
think-
8th.
Yes, I'd have to look at the calendar, but the next meeting after the election.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yes.
that would be
Okay.
the plan.
Okay. I don't think we could wait until then. I think we should be prepared.
Absolutely. So would you like to make a motion? I think we can help you form it out if you'd
Offer
like.
to help me.
I feel like that's what I've been doing this whole time, Shirley.
Okay. Okay, so are we, you're wanting to entertain a motion to either form a committee or to actually make a motion for a recommendation? Am I right? Is that how we need to phrase it? Either that the motion is, are we gonna just have an ad hoc from this board, or if we're making a formal recommendation to the council? Am I clear on what we need to do?
I believe, yes, you can do it either way. And again, it's limited to possible action on the strategic planning session. So if you wanted to make a motion to bring it forward to city council, you can do that, or you can make a motion for the committee at this time, or you can, I believe there was some discussion to table it until the next meeting. So I believe that those are all three actions that you might be able to make a motion upon. Are you in agreement with that as well? Those
Yes,
different
I
motions?
agree with that, so.
Okay.
What are you all thinking? What's the rest of the board thinking? Huh? Which other?
Just to make the motion for a recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's everybody else thinking?
Yeah.
You want the formal recommendation?
I was going to say the consensus seems to be, I mean, if you'd have made the motion she just suggested and we all vote for it, then we just have another motion to go forward.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the Tiers Board prepare a recommendation to be presented at the City Council meeting, at the first meeting after the June 7th election, to establish a strategy committee for tiers. I think that gets it.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Carlos. So, all right, if you're in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. All right, so I think
I have a
we.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. On the project cost, when you went through the review, Aaron, you were indicating that for parks and public facilities, that we really haven't spent a lot of money and done a lot with that under the different projects. Can you kind of expound as to why that is, or it just happened, or?
Well, I think there hasn't been a lot of specific projects that have come up. Obviously, the riverfront is a big park, MLK is a big park that's within the district. I'm guessing, and although I haven't done the full research, is that there just haven't been a lot of big projects that said, oh, well, TIRS might be a funding source for that. Now, we do, as you kind of go back to the finance report, and I'll go back to this real quick, you see on that streetscape maintenance on the south and the north, that actually does help pay for a parks member to do things. So there are funds coming out that are helping the parks department in this corridor area. But, you know, it being, and I had to put my glasses back on so I can actually read the number, but I think it says $3 million for parks and public spaces. Now, I also think public spaces means the streetscape for Chadburn, and there we've spent a lot of money on South
Right.
Chadburn and will be continuing up North Chadburn up to the Houston Heart. But I think that's where where Hannah's working on the private incentive audit, I'm trying to go back on the public side and say, all right, where did we as the Tiers Board make approvals, and then ultimately City Council make approvals for Tiers funding on public projects, and try to get established, well, what category did those fall in, how much were they, so that we do have a good baseline to move forward from.
Okay, because one of the things that I'm really interested in is we don't have just a gajillion parks, for instance, in either north or south.
Correct.
We have some, but it's not just a bunch of them. But of course, a couple of years ago, I was involved with trying to get something from the community that had to do with parks, and we basically had to raise our own money.
Right.
And now we've changed the rules where they have to raise a certain percentage of the funds before, they can even approach the council. So I guess what I'm saying is with the handful of parks that we have in north and south based on the boundaries, that's something that I'd kind of like to see us spend some money on if we can set a criteria, because it allows us to have more green space, those types of things help the community, it helps travel and tourism and all of that, because we don't have that many in either Tiers boundary. So that was the reason that I asked the question. If we've not spent a lot before, it seems like there may be an opportunity for us to look at spending a few dollars under those types of projects.
Yes, ma'am.
That feeds right into those strategy sessions. So, all right. So we have discussed, I feel like we've discussed this more than enough. Ready for the director's report?
Director's report, don't really have a whole lot other than Hannah's starting to get restaffed up. She's hired a new person, Miranda, for our front desk over there, and so you'll be seeing her. She kind of helps a little bit with customers that come in on the Tiers applications and things like that, so she's going to be working with him. So Hannah's starting to get, so much more free time now, so.
To work on those audits.
Work on those audits.
Got 2 hours a day now, right?
Right, yeah,
That's
she's
it.
got so much time, but she's done a great job, Hannah has, of helping us, as well as our team from downtown San Angelo, of trying to get the program out there. I think as Shirley mentioned, we are seeing more and more folks from the north side come in. We know there are some people that are working on some projects on the south side, in fact, that are looking forward to the fall cycle because they're already coming to us early, going through the DHRC process, going through the pre-development process, really trying to tie up what those numbers are. So I'm excited about that, and I think we've got a great opportunity to really set the focus of our Tiers Fund, what we want it to do for the next 10 years. So I appreciate everybody listening today and working with us, but it's going to be a busy summer. I'll be putting my budget hat on for the regular general fund budget, but this is a very key item, a strategy item for us to take care of for our city. And so we'll be working very hard, getting you all that background information and trying to satisfy what the committee's needs are to move forward to get this in front of council and get some real positive momentum coming up this fall. So,
All right. Thank you,
turn it
sir.
back to you. Thanks.
So I was just looking at my calendar while you were talking because we're looking at announcements and future agenda items, which we can see our next meeting will be June 24th, right here at 2 p.m. But do we also need to plan, I'm assuming the city council meeting will be on June 10th, the morning of Tuesday, June 10th, if I'm reading my calendar right? Because we'll need to.
First and third Tuesdays.
Okay, so that'd be the 17th. Yeah, so we need to plan as a board, or as many of us as possible, to be at the city council meeting on the 17th, so we can make the recommendation for the strategy planning committee, as I'm calling it.
Do we need
So.
to have a first recommended, do we need to have a first recommended date for this team if it's approved? Already ready?
Well, we'll meet, I mean, if that meeting is the 17th, and then we come in on the 24th, we can set the schedule then.
Okay.
Is what I'm thinking.
Schedule on the 24th.
Okay.
I think that
I'm fine with that.
makes sense, and I think we'll have a finalized committee panel at that time. We can start moving forward very quickly.
Okay, so June 17th, making a note real quick. City Council, all right. Well, with that, our next regular meeting will be June 24th, and we will, at that point, we will know what City Council's, I'll say their pleasure is, and then we can move forward with this strategy and planning discussion. But If no one has anything else, move to adjourn. All right. If you're in favor, stand up.